Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Four Realms of Effective Technology Use. And this quick presentation is kind of go over some big ideas about how technology can be used in the classroom and some of the things that all teachers and administrators should be thinking about when looking at technology integration into any classroom, whether it's a kindergarten classroom or a high school classroom. So to start off, I want to kind of break this up into two major categories because oftentimes we talk about technology and when we talk about technology, it's all encompassing when we're really using technology in a variety of different ways. And it's important for us to separate those out. So the two big categories are logistics and instruction. And then within that, we have organization and workflow, and then communication under logistics, and then under instruction, we have integration and innovation. So those are the four big buckets we're going to use to kind of describe what happens in most classrooms today. And it's how it's important to differentiate between the two because not all technology is created equal, and it's important for us to recognize that. So we'll start with organization. And this is things digitally that we need to wrap our brains around just to get through the day, you might say, to work out the logistics, the workflow of things that we're doing on a regular basis. Things like file management and how are you organizing files. So if you're using a desktop computer primarily and you're using Word files, what sort of file system do you have? If you're using Google Drive online or Office 365, how are you organizing your files there? Are you using a good titling, a way to title your files themselves, and then also a folder system. Now, Google obviously has some really good search features in Google Drive, and I rely upon those in a lot of cases, but it's good to be able to throw things into folders and have things set up in a way that it's easy to access and re-access, and so you're not looking, what did I title that? Oh, it's in this folder, and it has a natural place for it. The second piece with especially within the classroom is how to deliver assignment, and sometimes we mix that up. We mix the assignment delivery up with actually instruction. And just because you're using Google Classroom or Canvas or Blackboard or any of the other number of learning management systems or delivery methods, you got to get the assignments to kids. And that's not the same as teaching with technology. That's almost like the photocopier or the way that the instruction, which may or may not be based upon what's happening with students. And then the second piece, again, this sometimes gets mixed up, is how are you going to provide feedback and assessment? So how are you going to give how are you going to get kids information on how they're doing? All right, and again, that's through a grade book. That's through comments in a Google Doc, but understanding like that's something you have to really consider and making sure that you have a feedback loop. And one of the things, the places where teachers get hung up is sometimes it's if they don't have one, it feels overwhelming if you collect 180. If you're a high school teacher, you collect 180 activities from your 5 or 6 sections of students, and then all of a sudden there's no easy way to grade them. That's where rubrics, and that's where using some of the grading features within an LMS, within Google Classroom, can really streamline those. But those are certainly things you want to be thinking about. And also, how are you planning and providing that student-facing and parent-facing plan for what's happening on a day-to-day basis? Whether it's a digital calendar in a Google Doc like this, or maybe you're using Google Calendar, although I'm not a big fan of Google Calendar for this. It's just a little messy for providing assignments. If you're using a learning management system, again, like Schoology or Canvas or Blackboard, they're usually calendars that students can look at on what's due in all their classes, as opposed to flipping through their folder and checking the varied ways that each teacher provides due dates. So having something, if you can align it with what other teachers are doing, even better. All right. And if you're a K-5 teacher, then it's finding ways to branch out or organize all the subjects so students and parents aren't overwhelmed with the number, because as a K-5 teacher, K-6 teacher, you have the kids mostly for the whole day, but you're teaching them multiple subjects, so you have to be able to organize that in a way that might help you and the families you're working with kind of wrap their brain around all the different things you're trying to do. So the next big category is communication. So how are you getting information to your students and their families? So the first major piece is a website or a blog. So it could be that you're getting that information to your parents by sending something out regularly, posting on a blog, and having a go-to place. And if you're using a learning management system, that might be, again, where they're going. They're going to, I didn't mention Edmodo. Edmodo also one that's used pretty heavily by teachers all around. But a place for people to go that's regularly updated. Nothing worse than going to a teacher website that hasn't been updated in a month or 2 months. And I know this in my own experience as a parent, trying to find out what's due and then things not being updated. So I highly recommend committing to having kind of an updated presence on a website, in a blog, on your learning management system. Messaging, I think, is also super important. How are you going to update students, especially middle school, high school, and then families across the board on what's going on? So maybe it's Remind 101. It's not 101 anymore, it's just Remind. Maybe it's your messaging system, but what does that look like? And creating a system so it's regular. So you don't, one of the things I think is important that is, it's not this like, oh, every once in a while a random message comes from my teacher, but every week or every month or every 2 weeks or whatever it happens to be, end of every grading period or quarter, however, whatever regular interval you want to do it, because I think that student or that classroom teacher to student, family, parent connection is really important. And just letting kids know, and especially as they're getting into high school, letting them manage themselves, but you providing that connection to what's happening in your class. Because again, once they get into middle school, kids are managing a lot, and they don't necessarily know how to do that well. We need to work with them better on organization, right? Calendars play into that, and the website plays into that, and giving them updates through messaging also plays into that. Another thing is social media. So social media, I think, is a great opportunity to tell your classroom story, your school story, what's going on, what makes it a special place, how are you validating the great work that you're doing, that your students are doing, and whether it's a Twitter account or depending upon your audience, it might be a Twitter account, it might be an Instagram account. A handful of teachers I know are getting into the Snapchat world. I don't necessarily recommend that, but if you do that, you need to make sure you're safe and not just for you, but for your students and all that. So any social media, you want to make sure you're following your district's social media policy and guidelines or whatever they have in place. But this is also a great opportunity to share the learning, share the cool thing your kids are doing, making sure, of course, it's okay for you to do the sharing and having releases if necessary or parents signing off. But there's a lot of great stuff happening and being shared, and I encourage you to look into what it takes for you to do that in your school or district. So now we're crossing over the line. We're crossing over the line from kind of the workflow piece to the logistics piece into teaching, and it's really important that we make that distinction, because for years when I was at West Hills, I would help teachers create teacher websites, and for them that was sort of the end all be all of I'm using technology. And not for all, but for some of the teachers, I'm using technology, I have a website. And a website's a great start, but it's not the end. It's actually, the teaching is the end, right? The making progress with our students, having them demonstrate learning, that's what we're trying to get to with kids. So really important to be thinking about that. And so again, we have some categories here to kind of go through that. So the first is getting content to kids. So you're getting videos to kids. You're getting activities that they can do, podcasts they can listen to. They are, maybe it's a screencast like I'm doing here, where you're getting it to the students, and then they're doing something with it. So the kind of the baseline of all instruction is instruction, right? Giving them actual content on ideas, history, science, literature, and then also how to do those things, and getting that to kids in video format and document format, audio format, any other multimedia ways is one, level one, getting there. And then the next one is getting kids to do work online. So it could be that they're creating, filling out a Google form or a Google Doc of some sort that's sort of like a digital worksheet. Again, it could be a Microsoft item, depending upon what systems you have, but they're creating work digitally. And while some of it may seem like, oh, it's very similar to doing a worksheet, in some cases they are, but it's also the opportunity for us to really take that to the next level. Quickly interrupted there. So helping students take that to the next level. Where was I? Students work online. Okay, so the next piece is providing places for students to do work online. So it could be filling out a Google form. It could be doing a digital worksheet of some sort. But I would of course challenge you to think beyond the digital worksheet. Sometimes there's a place for you to do that sort of work. But we want to limit just the worksheet style activities that don't involve a lot of thinking, and that's kind of in the innovation side of what we'll be talking about. But there is a time and place, especially in the information gathering phases of a lot of lessons, or in the development of basic skills, as we're going to especially see in the K-5 world. So important to be thinking about where they're doing their work online. The next role in integration is the technical support. So how are kids using the things that are built into computers? And it could be, there's a great extension called Read and Write Google. Within Google Docs itself, there's ways for you to have voice typing, to do speech to text to speech, speech to text, to look up words, to translate words in Google Translate. And Google Translate can be the bane of a world language's existence, but for a kid who's learning English, it can be something that they can't live without, because they're not understanding a particular word. Instead of skipping the word, they are translating it, or for that struggling reader, that struggling learner, maybe they're looking up the word instead of just skipping it. And so getting kids to not only know that they're there, but kind of setting the expectation that they use them, that they're looking up words, because it doesn't do our kids any good to look at a word, I don't understand that, and just skip it. And if they do that a lot, they may be missing some of the meaning of what they're trying to read. And if they're reading on a computer screen, then those things are built right in. So really important that we are teaching our kids to use those, and expecting them to use them, and checking in that they're using them along the way. Another piece is progress tracking. So Khan Academy, Actively Learn, there's tons of websites, actually any LMS, School Classroom to some degree, Edpuzzle, they kind of let you know what kids are doing as they're building skills. And this is important, sort of a mastery-based setting, but also in any classroom setting, you want to see what kids have done. And we have the old school way of check marks and boxes and that sort of thing, but this kind of takes it to the next level as far as being able to track. So using tools that have those allow you to kind of keep track of what's going on with kids. So there's lots of, some of those apps I just described provide opportunities for you to do that. And of course, there's formative and summative assessment. So using tools to check for understanding, to help inform your instructional practices, and then also to give those big summative assessments. And those are the formative assessment pieces, Nearpod, Pear Deck, Google Forms, pieces built into LMSs, lots of things. Socrative is another one I use a bunch, both as I'd used when I was in the classroom, and then I continue to use in professional learning opportunities. Illuminate for summative assessments. There's AMP, that's part of Schoology. There's Mastery Connect, that's part of Canvas. And so there's lots of these pieces where kids are getting these opportunities to show their basic understanding on a day-to-day basis through technology, and of course the bigger assessments. And if you are in a public school, the big assessments are all done online. Whether it's LPAC with language acquisition, measuring that, or whether it's SBAC testing for ELA and math. And soon there's CAST testing for science, and who knows if social science will make a comeback in that. But all that's being done online. We give those kids a chance to experience some online assessments as well, so they can do better there. And then, of course, the world is filled with, online assessments. So it's important for us to give them those experiences. Okay, the last piece is innovation. So the innovation is, I think that's the promise of technology. That is where we want technology to bring us. And again, some big components there. The first is students should be more tired at the end of the day than the teachers. That the kids get some choices, that they are challenged in a way that is engaging. All right, so they get some control. Our traditional education system has the teacher controlling everything, and we want to move away from that. We want to give kids the chance to pick things that interest them, to go in directions that they want to. Now, obviously, we can't have just I'm not advocating for the unschooling model of school, in this case, but if you build the box a little bit bigger, you can still be within the box and let the kids kind of navigate where they want to go within that. And that's, I think, a super important piece, because we have a growing population of students who are bored, who are unengaged, and if you have your own kids, or you teach about the 4th through 6th grade realm, you see it start shifting there. And if we continue to put kids at the center of what we're trying to do, and giving them some opportunities to kind of help guide their education and where they go with that, or within the context of what we're trying to teach them, I think there's some great opportunities to better engage kids. And then student communication, getting kids to interact. All this technology doesn't mean don't interact. It means interact more in different ways. Do face-to-face, but also digital. Have kids share their ideas while they're in progress, and then when they're done, so they can get feedback along the way, instead of, and not just with you as the teacher, although you as the teacher should be doing that, but also with their peers, with people outside the class if possible, or students in other classes. Have kids look at each other's stuff and give critical feedback, and teach them how to do that. Those are also, again, important things that technology can lend themselves to. And then presenting to an audience. And that presenting can be what I'm doing right here, making a screencast and presenting to a group, or it could be in front of the class, or it could be through a Zoom or a Skype or a Google Hangout, where you're connecting with people that aren't in the room with you, but you're doing it live. There's lots of different ways to present ideas to an audience. Next is collaboration, working in teams, sharing responsibility, discussing and combining ideas, not just dividing up the work. In fact, dividing up the work is not collaboration. So it's important for us, again, give kids these opportunities. And they may be face-to-face in the same class, and they're collaborating on a digital project where they all have access to it, whether it's a Google Doc or a Google presentation, or a Wii video, or something else, but something where they can all kind of get their hands into it. And not have to go through a single filter. I can remember presentations, video projects I did, 20 years ago, where the kids all kind of planned it together, but ultimately one kid filmed it and another kid edited it. And then if it was a group of 3 or 4 or 5, which sometimes it was, those kids, while during the editing process, were not doing anything. Or I'd have to give them an extra assignment, which wasn't fair because they did other parts. And if you have something where everybody can be involved throughout the whole process, that's gonna go a long way. Student creativity, letting them do new things, letting them take risks, and then make iterations if it didn't quite go so well. It's not like an all or nothing. If you fail or don't fail, you want kids to keep thinking and keep working on something, and certainly there has to be an end point, but you give them time to come back from something that didn't go as well, because that's how life is. That's how, but you got a bad lesson. It's not like you're fired or fail the year. No, you come back the next day and you recover from it, and you do something better or different that builds on it. That type of thing. And the first bullet I think is so important, is let kids make stuff, and it could be an infographic or a video, or a case for making an argument for a particular viewpoint or side. But kids need to own some of that creative thinking, that problem solving, that coming up with things that didn't already exist, or versions of things that did exist, and let them do that. They will own their learning more. It goes back to the student-centered classroom, is they will own their learning if they can own it. But doing the same version of the same thing that everybody else is doing is not really giving them that creativity, that opportunity for creativity. And they need lots of those, and sometimes in small pieces and sometimes in gigantic pieces. And not that you shouldn't have structure or storyboards or guides along the way. You should, but you should also be giving them opportunity to wow you. You give them a template, they will complete the template, and then you will do as many as you have students, you'll look at the same thing. But if you don't give them a template or an exemplar or an example, who knows what you're going to get? And some of it may be mediocre, and some of it may be absolutely amazing. And so that's something to be thinking in the back of your head, is also how much do you want to lead them, and how much do you want them to go on their own? And maybe that depends upon the time of the year, or what grade they're in. Of course, critical thinking is paramount. You can't say enough or do enough about critical thinking. It needs to be part of everything they do. They need to construct their own understanding. They need to not only solve problems, but maybe find problems. Let them come up with ideas, and they'll struggle with that, especially the bright ones, because they've been schooling school for so long. They know how to find the answers to the problems posed, but they don't necessarily know what to do beyond that. They need to analyze, synthesize, interpret, apply their knowledge and skills and concepts to things that are authentic and real world and are important to them, not just what's in the standards. Standards don't mean anything to them. They want to do things bigger than the standards. And they may feel like, if they've been brainwashed, indoctrinated enough into this standards-based system, we must know this and then this and then this. But that doesn't help them in the real world, to use that cliche. And I think one of the biggest things also in that critical thinking is the reflection on their learning. What did they learn? Why did they learn it? How could they have done better? Can they build on this for the next time? What does that look like? If they could redo it, what would it be? If they could start back from zero, and maybe that they need to start back from zero, and there's reflections along the way to make sure they are going in the direction you want them to, and that they're understanding how they're learning, because we want them to become expert learners themselves. That will require them to reflect on how they're learning. Digital projects and lessons. So this is, you're providing them the information to finish what they need to finish. So it's a project guide, a lesson guide that has the supports and scaffolds needed. And instead of sort of differentiating on the spot, it's providing a lot of those supports and scaffolds for all kids all the time. And that's, if you're familiar with universal design for learning, that's kind of the fundamental piece of that, is kids have the supports they need, and they know which ones they need. And we are trusting them and teaching them to only use the ones they need, and the challenge to take that next step to challenge them. And then you, of course, as a teacher, trying to push on that as well. And you're going to see in this course some templates on how to do that, kind of hyperdoc style, digital lesson style, that kind of walks them through that. And then, of course, this is related to the creativity and the student-centered classroom, is get them to do stuff. And that stuff can be digital, infographic, video, or maybe it's physical, or maybe it's a choice, and maybe it's a choice for one project and not for another, or everybody's making something physical one project and no one's making physical the other project, or however you want to work it. But then the students going through that whole process, and from planning all the way to completion, is an important piece. And I would say try to avoid traditional threefold poster boards, but maybe there's a time and a place for that, or there's an option for that. Or, I always like to have kids do things one way, one project, and have to pick a different way for the next project, so they're not all stuck doing the exact same thing. And then I think this is one of the last ones is sharing. They should share final products with peers, falling back in communication and collaboration, but sharing those final products to a wider audience, ideally, beyond you, whether it's their peers, because they're just fine submitting mediocre work to their teachers. Some kids, not all, obviously. But having that out there that's bigger, okay, exhibit their learning, and then they can internalize their learning more if they can. That will force them to reflect on their learning, and they will build a pride in their learning that doesn't necessarily happen in a traditional setting. So them sharing beyond them, whether again it's a gallery within a classroom, fantastic. It's a digital portfolio. It's sharing a link on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. It's getting out there and making it bigger. So that's the end of this screencast that kind of talks. I'm going to jump back to the very beginning, just to remind you where we started. It's instruction and logistics are different, and those other pieces that we just went through, innovation, integration, that's about kids learning and building skills and using the tools to track that and to encourage that and to let them go forward with that. Organization and communication is about the workflow of the room, or online or virtual, or online or face-to-face, making sure people are connected, making sure things are working, and grades are recorded, and feedback is given, and assignments are given and submitted. But that's not about the learning. Those are important pieces. But let's make sure when we're thinking about technology use that we are thinking about them in these kind of two big categories with these subcategories underneath them. So there's an activity based upon this. So now that you're a little more familiar with the different pieces, go ahead and go do the activity. If you have any questions, make sure to let me know. Good luck.